everybody. Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall too everywhere. How are you? Yay! Spring is headed our direction, I do believe. It's been actually unseasonably warm here in Montana, and I hope that wherever you are, it's been reasonable. You know, we've had some weird weather with tornadoes down in Nashville, Tennessee, and just bizarre stuff. Snowstorms that are the size of the country and all the weird weather that we have. Yet I sincerely hope that you've been having a blast wherever you are and that there are really spooky things headed your way. For the rest of this podcast, and I have really been looking forward to this one. And today we're talking about fear versus fact. What's real in the ghost world? And I get a lot of email that's paranormal because that's what I used to do a lot more of was paranormal investigation. In fact, that's how I started on television, was being part of paranormal investigation teams all over the place in different paranormal pilots. I was the psychic who was on the scene, wandering around looking for ghosts along with, the ghost investigators. And we're talking 2006 to 2010-ish, right in there, where the big ghost hunters craze was coming out. And so we had a lot of paranormal TV back then that involved a lot of night vision cameras and people knocking around and saying things into the dark like, "Is anybody there? Tell me your name. Do you know you're dead? Are you angry?" And God, back then, right, in 2006 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10, 11 and 12 and whatever, we would just sit and watch that for half an hour. Like really super grainy, FLIR, strange heat-generated imagery, or you'd be looking at the infrared camera. So somebody would wear black and they would glow white on the camera. I mean, all the things. So when you work on those shows, it's TV, right? So there's a certain amount of staging that has to be done. Now, I'm not saying that the ghost hunt itself is fabricated or staged. Of course, in the editing process, those poor editors are tasked with trying to make this not look like the most boring show on the planet, with people wandering around in the dark, black and white, grainy. Is anybody there? Silence, silence, silence. Can you tell me your name? Nothing is happening on the TV. And pretty soon you're just like, oh my God, seriously. So, there is a certain amount of staging, and sometimes, depending on the show, I'm not going to name names because I've worked on a lot of them. Sometimes the people who are the directors or the producers who are working with the paranormal crew will ask them to do things. And they won't ask them to see a ghost that's not there. Yet they may say, can you make your face look a little more scared? Or can you do this? Or can you do that? And sometimes these producers or directors are actually, on set with the camera people. Sometimes they are the camera people, or they're talking to the camera people as the camera person has an earpiece in, or they're talking to the talent themselves. Whoever the ghost hunter is, they may have an earpiece in, and that line producer, sometimes you hear it. You'll hear the directors and producers. If you watch, like back in the day, one of my favorite things to do was to get a bunch of towels at Halloween and just spread them all over my bed at that time. And I would get a bunch of goodies for Halloween and pop popcorn and all the things. And I would turn on the 24-hour or whatever it was marathon Ghost Hunters episode. Do you remember that with Jason and Grant? I mean, the Ghost Hunters episode, it was Halloween, and you would just watch the whole thing, and it was live. Now, the problem with shooting a ghost hunt live is you have so many logistics issues. I mean, it's terrible. I don't know how the hell they did it because you're watching it stream live. So, of course, I'm weighing in to see it live. And one year they had Josh Gates from Destination Truth, right? And he was the big host. And so Josh Gates was up there and he was talking to Jason and Grant, and they're talking about what they're going to do. And they're going to go find all these ghosts and blah, 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 blah. So, with that all in mind, I think it's so interesting that we actually sat there and watched these ghost hunters. Sometimes, we watched them foobar some of the direction they were taking. And the fact that this particular podcast about fear versus fact, okay? I'm not trying to break apart any shows or pick on ghost hunters or anything like that. There was just one particular episode that was one of those Halloween episodes, and the guys and ghost hunters were on some island somewhere. So they really had logistical issues trying to get the gear over there, period. Okay? So they did get the gear over, and they were trying to, work with whatever they could. And I just remember that they kept having tech problems. And what you've got to remember is there is a line producer and a director that are switching these camera angles. So we'd be watching Jason and Grant walk forward. Then we go to commercial, okay? Then all of a sudden we'd flip back to the live broadcast of this live ghost hunt with Jason and Grant, and they were all just standing there in a line. And then you would hear a guy off camera go. And then they'd all start walking and start talking to each other. So basically they were waiting at the end of the hallway, obviously, because it's live, and they were waiting for the commercial break before they walked down the hallway. But when you see those things as a viewer, I just remember thinking, oh, somebody's fired on the switching cameras. They were probably supposed to have an outdoor shot or something like that. And then they were going to switch to Jason and Grant walking up the hall. But I was noticing on that particular episode that there were quite a few technical foobars that were getting picked up and put on the air. And one of them, I can't remember which ghost hunter it was. It was one of those guys. And you could hear some director talking. Like, if you have somebody sitting next to you with earbuds in on a bus or something, and you can hear the music coming out of their earbuds because it's cranked. Well, you're looking at this scene, and I don't remember which ghost hunter it was, but you could hear somebody's earpiece. You could hear, it's like dead quiet, right? And they're like, is there anybody here? And it's quiet, and this is what you hear. Is there anybody who wants to say a name? And then it goes off again, and not like, and you can almost hear them say, just ask them about this or just ask them about that. And I don't know if it was an earpiece in the ghost hunter's ears or if it was in one of the cameraman's ears, but you're watching this live ghost hunt and you can hear the director or the line producer on live TV during the ghost hunter's big giant Halloween extravaganza. It was so disturbing. I still remember it all these years later. And I just remember we go to commercial and we come back and the guys were so agitated. And I think they were probably having a hard time because there were people looking at fan message boards, right? And the fan message boards were blowing up like, hey, did you guys, we just saw the camera, guy, or we heard the camera guy tell you to reach down the hallway, or, and you could see that the ghost hunters guys were getting irritated because they're honestly trying to hunt ghosts while you got cameras in your face. So the reason I just spent the first 8 minutes of this episode talking to you about the production of ghost shows, okay, is because, for all intents and purposes, those ghost shows have really, really painted a picture for America on what's real with ghosts and ghost hunting and what we can be afraid of and what's fact and what's fiction. And it doesn't bother me that obviously we have some, creative interpretations of a few things on a ghost hunting show, whatever. I think what gets me the most is that it causes a lot of fear. Because when you're trying to make a TV show interesting, you're fabricating interaction or you're fabricating a face. And I'm not saying fabricating interaction like Jason and Grant never faked finding a ghost. That's not what I'm saying. Yet there are other shows which shall remain nameless where they punch up that ghost interaction like you would not believe. I mean, they really punch it up to the point that it's embarrassing. And then I get clients calling me saying things like, I think there's a demon in my basement. Not everything's a demon, gang. So when we're talking about fear versus fact, I do blame paranormal television for a lot of people's whacked out ideas of what ghosts are all about and what they do. because it's not real that demons are running all over the earth. Are there demons? Yes. Are they real? Yes. Are they running all over the place and living in your laundry room? Probably not. Not unless you live in a very specific vortex area. Not unless the land that you're living on had a ton of atrocities that drew them there in the first place. I mean, the amount of people that think they have a demon in their basement because of a lot of ghost shows out there that are super sensationalized is astronomical. And one of the things that I had a big meeting with my producer for Road Angel, Mary Erickson, I had big meetings with her, and she had big meetings with me, because she did not want me in any way, shape, or form, even if I was encountering a very scary entity on Road Angel. She didn't want the show to become this big sensationalized, like, ooh, I think I saw a flick of light. Ooh, I'm feeling angry, evil vibes. Ooh. And I encounter, especially on the Road Angel pilot, I run across all kinds of ghosts, and I have all kinds of talks with them. Yet, we're not doing the scrunched up face and the, oh my gosh, this is really terrifying. Because guess what? There's probably not a demon in my laundry room, okay? So we have a lot of belief systems about ghosts that aren't necessarily true. One of them, a fear fact, not a fact, a fear bullet point, is that ghosts will never leave a house or never leave a space. Now, they have to kind of leave every once in a while because of the nature of the vortex doorways that are in the ground beneath them. So even the most haunted of houses is how do I put this? Even the most haunted of houses is going to be open to the ghosts coming and going. And I ran into this when I shot my documentary, Montgomery House, The Perfect Haunting. So, I mean, literally, those ghosts in that house were not there 24/7. They came and they went. But there were zones in the house that they did come back to. And, it was almost like a stereotype. There were little kids in the attic. In that particular instance, there were very dark things in the basement. There was demonic activity in that basement because there were fetuses of babies that were disposed of in that basement. When, it used to be a bordello, it was a doctor's office, and there was a big old boiler that I think some little, baby carcasses went into. And I mean, again, this is stuff that you could feel downstairs. A lot of it was hearsay. We were trying to find some kind of historical documentation to back this up. However, what we did find was that there was a lot of people who knew the stories and the lore in the town. A few people who knew that it was a whorehouse at the time. And we're not supposed to say that anymore, but way in the old west, it's what it was. It was a house of ill repute. So in that case, I'll use Montgomery House. The fear bullet point is that ghosts will be there and they will torment you no matter what, and they're 24/7. That's not true. They come and go. Yes, they will be attached to a house. You will usually notice that those ghosts are going to be active during certain times of the night or day. That not only has to do with their own routine, it has to do with the fact that there are geomagnetic attributes in that ground, which are going to make it more optimized for that ghost to travel up and down those hallways. Maybe there's a harder flowing spring during a certain time of the morning underground. Maybe there are earth energies that pump through that are impeded by the, telephone lines back in the day and the old cables of power hanging over the house. And those die down and there's not as much draw on those electrical cables during the night. A lot of draw during the day for electrical cables with everybody's TVs and appliances and computers on. So it's not true that a ghost is going to be hardcore haunting 24/7 in a house. That's a fake fear thing. The fact is, the ghost is only going to be there when it's optimized for it, just like we're only going to be somewhere when it's optimized for us. So even the most haunted house, if you know where the ghosts are, and you just kind of stay out of those zones, it's unlikely that the ghost is going to chase you to an area of the house where it never goes just to haunt you. That's generally not what happens. It takes a lot of effort for ghosts to step out of their particular zone. And they're in a zone because, again, there's an electromagnetic attribute to that area that boosts up their signal, so to speak, kind of like a router booster. We have this old lath and plaster house that we live in. And I love lath and plaster houses. They're like living in a Faraday cage. They take all of the stress and all of the energy out of the air, and it shoves it all down the walls and into the ground. And I love it at my house. It's very peaceful. Anyway, just like an old lath and plaster house where you need to put router boosters so the router signal can get around the corners, because again, Faraday cage, grounding. That's literally what the electromagnetic pockets in certain parts of a home are going to do for ghosts. They're going to boost up their signal. So that's why you always find ghosts in certain parts of houses, maybe always in a hallway. You find a lot of newer construction where you find ghosts or ghostly feelings in a hallway. And a lot of reasons for that is because there's generally in a hallway, there's a lot of ductwork, oftentimes under the floors, in the ceilings. You're running a duct back to maybe 2 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms. So there's a lot of sometimes water conduits that go under the floor down that hallway to the bathroom. So there's a lot of energy transference in a hallway if you're just looking at the metal alone and the wires alone. This is all making sense about, well, if I was a ghost, I'd go hang out where metal and wires and water boost EMF. That's what I would do, electromagnetic frequency. So, yeah, the fake fear is that ghosts will follow you everywhere. The fact is that they're going to stay in their little zones and they're going to stay in their little pockets. Another fake fear around ghosts is that they're going to follow you home if you go on a ghost hunt. That's not true. Now, other dark things can follow you home if you go on a ghost hunt. Most notoriously, demonic life. Now, demonic life will get stuck on the bottom of your shoe like gum if you're in the wrong space and you're afraid. Again, though, keeping in mind that really, it's hard to find a demon. So there's a lot more human beings running around the earth acting like demons than there are demons actually running around the earth being demons. So what I would tell you is one of the most notorious locations to get a really dark passenger that's going to follow you home. And I'm really on the fence about saying anything about this because I don't want y'all running out there and deciding you're going to actually run an experiment and see if you can get a demon to follow you home. They're not kittens. You don't want them to follow you home, okay? It's not like having a little baby exotic tiger that's going to grow up into something really pretty and awesome. They're an ass pain to get rid of. So you don't want to pick them up on your shoe, so to speak. But there is a place in Kentucky called Bobby Mackey's. And Bobby Mackey's is a music club. It's a very famous music club, obviously owned by Bobby Mackey, who's a musician. And it was built over the top of a cult space where it is rumored that people were basically cut apart and used as part of a demonic ritual. And before that, the land was said to have a witch on it. Kind of like the Bell Witch. It's that part of the country down there in the south. It's all those limestone caverns and caves. And there was a particular barn out of Bobby Mackey's that has a well dug. And it was said that after people would get their heads sawn off or whatever they were doing for these demonic sacrifices or these witch sacrifices, that they would throw the heads down the well as kind of a sacrifice to the ground or whatnot. Well, there are some really dark beings, demons if you want to call them that are attracted to really traumatic, awful stuff. And you got to remember that demonic life is attracted to pain and suffering. And it has a purpose. And the purpose is to eat pain and suffering and discontent out of the ethers, like a shark that goes around and eats all the junk out of an ocean. Like it's going to go around and eat all the garbage up. That's what it's going to do. So one of the things that I think is so fascinating is that when you look at Bobby Mackey's, okay, Bobby Mackey's is a music club, which is all these festivities that's built on this really bizarre, weird, dark space, this land. So I have known of many ghost hunters who have gone to investigate Bobby Mackey's, and they're like, well, I had a weird feeling, but I really was kind of scared of the demons, so I'm glad they didn't come out. Then they go home and they're laying in bed and there's like a growling on the side of their bed, or something pulls the covers off of them, or any of the classic wacko horror movie crap. That's more so how demons roll than ghosts, to be honest with you. Basically, they're going to read the hard drive in your brain and they're going to figure out what scares the crap out of you, and that's what they're going to do. But they're going to build it up because demons never want to blow their whole hand at one time. They kind of want to stretch it out and see if you'll be, morbidly sad or worried or whatever, because the more you're suffering, they're eating that, right? So it's kind of a messed up cycle. So I've known ghost hunters who have gone to Bobby Mackey's, and while they were there, had major scratches, 2 and 3 big deep marks on their shins, on their back. Then they go home and those scratches start appearing on them. So here's where this gets weird. So the fake fear bullet point is that a ghost will follow you home. No, ghosts don't leave their zones. They are stuck in homes. Or they choose to be in homes, or they literally are fueled by the power in the ground in that home. So that's where they're staying. Okay. So that's really important to know. That's an important piece. The second part of this is that, yes, demons can follow you home, but it's pretty rare. The third part of it is, don't go to Bobby Mackey's afraid of demons, hoping to find them and hoping they don't follow you home, because then they will follow you home. And the thing about demons is they're like angels. They're the junky cousins of the angels. So they can bilocate. Okay. So they're still at Bobby Mackey's, but they're also in your house. It's like a really, really messed up version of Dr. Manhattan. So, it's like, what's happening? So just know that if you do end up with a demon, you can get rid of them. They're a butt pain. Yet, is it going to be a ghost? No. Is it probably going to be a demon if that's happening? Yes. Now, at Bobby Mackey's, there are other things at play besides demonic activity. There are also heavy-duty elementals over there. And a lot of what people have thought were demons at Bobby Mackey's are elemental beings. I mean, you got to remember, this place is in Wilder, Kentucky. Okay, that's not a very big town. And in Wilder, Kentucky, Bobby Mackey's is just like this funky looking, kind of run down looking building, to be honest with you. Just kind of white painted bricks. It's by railroad tracks. I mean, it looks like a really fun roadhouse is what it looks like. But anyway, when you're looking at this place, it's right by a bunch of trees. It's in that wet southern Kentucky area. Elemental beings are God's middle management for nature. And so you have to consider there's this huge railroad track out there, which also conducts EMF. You've got this slaughterhouse that was built next to Bobby Mackey's. You've got Bobby Mackey's, the club itself. I mean, it's huge. It's huge in terms of intrusion into land. And whenever you intrude into land with a lot of cutting down of trees, or a lot of messing with ley lines, or digging power lines or sewer lines into the ground, you're going to disturb elementals, which of course, again, are God's middle management for keeping nature running. And they also don't want to see a lot of disturbance in the area of, really any of the energetic vein systems of the earth. And we as human beings, we don't understand how many of those energetic vein systems we actually destroy when we backhoe an area. I mean, it's unbelievable what we're doing to earth energies while we're just, especially that first 6 inches and 4 inches and 2 inches of life in soil. I mean, there's so much life in the first 2 inches of soil. There's more life there than a lot of places. So when we're tearing all that up for construction, those elemental beings tend to hang around the place that was torn up. In this case, Bobby Mackey's was out in that, it was a slaughterhouse and it was a club and all these things, but it was out in this very wooded area in a small town. And so a lot of the demonic activity, or what people claim to be demonic activity out there, a lot of it was elemental activity. And a lot of it is just flat open portals where these elementals are crossing in and out. Now, elementals will scratch you like a demon will. They'll scratch you. They're ornery. They'll go after you to get you out of an area. Generally, you can tell if it's demonic life because instead of scratches, you get these, they'll scratch you, the demon will, but they welt up. They get nasty. It's a nasty scratch. If you've ever had a scratch like that, you get a welt first, and then all of a sudden a scratch kind of appears out of the welt. So the welt is there, and then the scratch comes up. If you get scratched by an elemental, it's a scratch. Like if a cat scratched you, like you bleed and whatever. Demonic scratches, they hurt and they burn and they come up from the bottom of your skin. And you look down and you have these funny red marks that are forming. And then all of a sudden the red mark just has like a little fine, like a razor blade was just cut right across it. And you might have a little blood there. And I had those on my calf at Montgomery House, and I did not want them filmed because I really didn't want to give the demons, I mentioned them in Montgomery House, but I really didn't want to give them that much airtime. And it made me mad that they scratched me on the leg. And I'm like, nah, you guys don't get to get on camera. I showed the crew. I was like, you guys check this out. And they're like, we got to film that. I'm like, don't you film it. I don't want it on there. They don't get that much airtime. They're getting mentioned. That's enough. So if we take Bobby Mackey's as an example, again, ghosts aren't going to follow you home. Demons could. If we take Bobby Mackey's as an example, you walk in there and there's a sign. And the sign says, warning to our patrons, this establishment is purported to be haunted. Management is not responsible and cannot be held liable for any actions of any ghosts or spirits on this premises. Because people have had scratches, they've been pushed out of chairs, they've been pushed through doorways, they've had bricks thrown at them. And a lot of those actions, the pushing and the bricks and the very aggressive stuff, that's not really demonic life oftentimes as much as it is the elemental occupation. Because elementals just want us the hell out of there. They don't want us there. They want us gone. And so we have to pay attention in a haunting to the ground. And another freaky fact, like fear fake fact, it's not a real fact, it's a fake fear bullet point, is that hauntings can happen anywhere and everywhere. You would think that by watching some of these ghost shows where, everything is haunted. The closet is haunted. There have been psychics on different ghost hunting shows that are just, that really do need some kind of a Depakote or something for the mental issue that they are filming and calling a psychic ability. It's sad. It's exploitive to me. When I watched, and I'm not going to mention any names or any shows, but one psychic in particular, who it's very clear that this individual has a mental issue. It's clear by the way they speak. It's clear by their, they have these huge wide open eyeballs and there's just white space all around their corneas. There's a mental illness there. And I'm not saying that individual isn't psychic as well. I'm just saying that the TV production company has taken advantage of and is exploiting this person. And this person is spouting a lot of garbage that's not true on a TV show. And one of them is that everywhere and everything can be haunted. That is a fake fear bullet point. That's not true. Again, we've been talking about what is in the ground places. And what is in the ground is really going to determine a haunting. I live in this old house, like I said, and I've got lath and plaster. I have iron in my walls. And anytime you have that old metal, it conducts electromagnetic energy. So even though you need a signal booster for your router in a lath and plaster home, it's easier for spirit life to crawl inside the walls and use that metal as a conductor to get places. It's a lot easier than aluminum. It's a lot easier than just sheetrock. These old homes, that's why a lot of hauntings happen in old homes. They're made to be ghost cages, ghost propellants. Ghosts don't necessarily get stuck there, but the ground does make a giant difference. It makes a giant difference. So I just want you to know that because there are so many paranormal shows that make it look like every single inch of the earth has a demonic possession and a ghost wandering around, and that's absolutely untrue. As a matter of fact, it's so untrue. Let me use Bobby Mackey's as an example, okay? So you go back to 1850 in Wilder, Kentucky, and there was a slaughterhouse and a meat packaging plant that was built on the land that Bobby Mackey's is currently on. And it was a huge thing. And in the basement, of course, it had this well. And we were talking about the well where all these heads were tossed, right? And basically, what they poured down the well at the time was gross stuff. It was slaughter stuff, like animals' blood and guts and waste and yucky crap. Now, whenever you do have blood going just right straight into the ground and lots of it, that also will attract demonic life. Because you have to remember that there is a lot of DNA imprint and emotional imprint in blood. And blood means something alive is here. And if we're just pouring a bunch of blood down into the ground, and there's also a lot of iron in blood, there's a lot of, if you want to call it magnetic or conductive material in blood. So that does attract a lot of things. Blood just doesn't attract sharks. It attracts a lot of things that are just weird. Because whenever you're spilling a ton of blood into a ground, that's also indicative if you are a demonic being that likes to eat pain. You know where you find a lot of blood in the ground? Between the trenches in World War I, okay? There's a lot of trauma happening there. If I eat trauma, yay, lots of blood in the ground means I have an all-you-can-eat buffet, and I better head my butt on over there, all right? So another example of blood in ground attracting really creepy stuff that stays there is the Ram's Inn over in England, which used to be a human sacrifice site, the ground was, and they built a pub on top of it. And it's got serious, hardcore, witchy, dark, demonic, heavy, all kinds of creepy energies over there, as well as elemental energies. I'm getting tongue-tied tonight. And because of those particular energies, one of the things that really drew it all there was the despair of why the blood was thrown into the ground. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time believing, even if somebody is the biggest satanic worshiper ever, that they really enjoy having their throat cut. Come on. I mean, that's got to really not be fun. So that kind of distress also gets put into the blood, and the blood gets put into the ground. Now, same goes for animals. So back to Bobby Mackey's in 1850 with the slaughterhouse on it, right? So you've got this slaughterhouse, and I mean, this well, and they're dumping all of these animal blood and animal guts and gross animal things down the well. So you've got a lot of suffering in this blood that's being dumped there, because you have to remember this was back in the 1850s. So nobody from PETA was making them slaughter the animals in a humane way. A lot of times they just took a sledgehammer and bashed in their heads until they died. They didn't want to waste a bullet on a cow. They would just beat it in the head till it died. I mean, that's pretty traumatic. And then the other cows are watching, the baby cows are watching the mama cow get beat up, and it's awful. So again, you don't have to be human to have the trauma that you experienced go into the blood. And it's, fair to say that I've never actually ever, and nor do I plan on it, been to a satanic ritual where someone human was sacrificed. I have had friends who got out of cults, and oftentimes the people who were being killed were not really willing participants. They were kidnapped virgins or babies or something really disgusting. So you still have a lot of fear in the blood that's going into the ground in that case, right? So again, not that there's satanic cults all over the place. I hope not, God, killing people. But we're talking about, do ghosts wander everywhere and just haunt everything? And the answer is no. So why would they haunt a slaughterhouse if those were animals that were being killed? It's because of the trauma in the animals that goes into the blood, that goes into the earth, and the elementals come and say, whoa, this is gross, you're killing animals. And then all the demons come and say, yay, there's a lot of suffering here. So you have this hot spot in Bobby Mackey's, okay? So later, so we're going to speed up to the 1890s. At some point, that slaughterhouse got shut down for some reason. And of course, a well is a well. It's dug into the ground. And it was just left to sit there. And pretty much it was part of just the lore of all the blood that got dumped down it. So all the wackadoodles and all the satanic weirdos and all the things would use this well, it was said anyway, to dispose of their own sacrifices, okay? And many of those rituals involved what a lot of researchers of this particular location have said We're both animal and human. And it's just, I mean, it's icky, you know? So basically the reason that you get this weird sacrificial stuff from these cults, it's supposedly to prove loyalty. All right. And so this is where kind of the headless thing came in. And this has nothing to do with Satanism. It has nothing to do with Bobby Mackey's. Yet we're talking about areas that can collect bad juju. And when they collect the bad juju, then bad things are attracted to the bad juju at those areas. All right. So here we are back at the Bobby Mackey's location, but we're going to change our story a little bit. And there was a woman named Pearl Bryan. And in 1896 or thereabout, she disappeared. And she was living in Greencastle, Indiana, and she was super religious. And she came up pregnant. And I mean, she was way pregnant from her boyfriend. And he was the son of a minister, okay? Of course. So here she is super pregnant from a minister's son. And this son, whose name was William Wood, convinced her to get an abortion. And the deal was this chick was already 5 months pregnant. Pearl Bryan was, okay? So this guy, her boyfriend, William Wood, finds this dude who's a friend of his named Scott Jackson. And he was a dental surgery student in Ohio. And you know where this is going, okay? And he was hoping that his friend could help him with this abortion. And so the thing that's weird here is that the rumor was that this friend of his who was going to perform an abortion because he was in dentistry school, because that makes sense in, my God, 1896. The rumor was he was part of this satanic cult. All right. So, you know, who knows? But the rumor was that it practiced in the slaughterhouse in Wilder, which is, of course, where Bobby Mackey's ends up, right? So basically, Pearl left to go have this procedure done. And she said that she was going to Indianapolis, but she's secretly going to get this scary abortion. And at the time, I mean, it's not like you could just go to Planned Parenthood. So 5 months pregnant is pretty far along. And unfortunately for her, this Jackson guy just didn't really know what he was doing. And they tried to induce a abortion using cocaine. And then, of course, they broke into the dental tools, and that didn't work out. And this went on for a long time. And like an hour and some later, they really had this injured, sobbing human being. And they're like, okay, well, none of this worked. She's bleeding. This is bad. And so this is what came out later when they caught these guys. Okay, that's how we know what happened to this young lady. Basically, they cut her head off, you know, and she was alive and conscious. They severed her head from her body with dental tools, you know, because now she can point them out as people trying to commit abortions or give her an abortion, committing abortion. And so they offed her. It's horrible. And so basically they dumped her body outside of the slaughterhouse area, but they kept her head. And so this is what's weird. And they eventually found that this Jackson guy, this dental student guy, was the one who killed her. They found hair on his stuff, and they never did find her head. And a lot of people believe that the head was used in some kind of satanic ritual and got dumped in that well I was telling you about in the old slaughterhouse. And, you know, who knows really what happened to it? Yet the reason people think that it got tossed into that well, and you have to keep in mind that well was rumored to be used for cult activity for quite a long time, you know, and you know how rumors get started. But I mean, this Jackson guy who killed her was on the scaffold getting ready to be hung because they basically completely got caught. And in 1897, they fessed to their crimes, and they were put on trial and sentenced to death by public hanging. And so this is really awful because the boyfriend, this Wood guy, that her boyfriend who made her get the abortion or suggested she did, made a deal. He cut a deal with the authorities where he would get off, but he had to testify against the two of his buddies that he had asked to perform this abortion. And basically, the two guys who performed the abortion were also offered a plea deal. They were offered life sentences for the location of Pearl's head, but they refused to tell him where the head was. They refused. And my thinking on that is they probably refused because it was used in some kind of ritual, and maybe it was gone, and they didn't want, I don't know, maybe they didn't want the devil being mad if they took the head back, or they didn't want to out the cult and all the people in the cult. But anyway, so they didn't take the plea deal. They both got hung, and that was it. So when we talk about ghosts being everywhere or demons being everywhere, that is not true. This Bobby Mackey's place, and there's tons of different stories that go on, and I won't burn up this whole entire podcast with Bobby Mackey's. That is one example of a lot of stuff that has happened out there on that land. And I just wanted to demonstrate for you that trauma can attract the dark, creepy stuff. And it depends. I mean, sometimes trauma can also attract great healing. The Battle of the Little Bighorn, the battlefield out here, it used to be called Custer's Battlefield, which is a really bad name for it because he got killed and so did everybody else in his cavalry. Yet at the Battle of the Little Bighorn, there were a lot of native people and mostly cavalry that died out there. Lots and lots and lots. And when I was a little kid, I'd wander around out there and I would see ghosts of different cavalry people who were hiding in coulees, and they were terrified, and they were asking me where their buddies were. And I'm, 8 years old, and I'm kind of wandering away from my grandparents, hoping they're not noticing I'm talking to this ghost in a coulee. However, if you go to the Battle of the Little Bighorn battlefield, that was a bloody battle. And for those of you that don't follow history, Custer's last stand, right? And Custer in his hubris went out there. He was going to kill the Injuns, don't you know? And his scout Curly came back and said, dude, don't go over those hills because there's teepees as far as your eye can see. And they said, well, how many Injuns do you think are over the hill? And Curly said, 10,000, maybe 5,000. Well, they didn't believe Curly. They thought he was lying. So they go traipsing on in with their weird European hubris. Here they come. Here comes the cavalry with their cannons and whatever. And there were so many indigenous tribes there that had for the first time really banded together to fight a common enemy. So it wasn't just the Crow or the Lakota or the Sioux. It was everybody. And they came over the ridge, and there's Custer, which, by the way, did you know that Custer traveled with a valet? He did. He traveled with a young boy that would curl his hair before a battle. A young boy. I bet he did. I mean, can you picture it? You're Custer, you have your valet. Custer has this valet, and he is going to get his hair curled. Because if you're going to go in with a bunch of savages, and let's be honest, they're just a touch sexy because they've got all those hot chests hanging out and all the war paint, and let's not even talk about the tight-fitting skins, okay? Sometimes they're just flat up naked. So Custer had to look his best to go riding into battle. So he had his very, very delicate, very young valet, this is no kidding, curl his hair before he rode into battle. Come on, George Armstrong, let's just shine those buttons and put on your patent leather there, honey. I mean, honest to God. And he would have him brush his uniforms, and sometimes his valet would even brush his teeth for him, okay? So that's who we're dealing with here. Here comes George Armstrong Custer barreling over the ridge, seeing 10,000 teepees, and of course, the 7th Cavalry then is completely annihilated. Just absolutely. And Reno Benteen were two other cavalry guys in the back. They were coming up to help him out, and they got belayed, so they were stuck back there, and they all died. So there's a lot of blood in this ground at the Little Bighorn battlefield. And the Little Bighorn River snakes through the bottom there. And of course, many Native people died as well. But it was really the cavalry that took it down. It was ridiculous. They didn't even stand a chance. And the Native communities were trying to send a lesson. So one could argue that battlefield would be super, super, super haunted, okay? And yeah, there are ghosts there. But as time has gone on, and the Crow Nation has blessed that land, and many other Native nations have come out and blessed that land and blessed the losses, all of the losses of life that were out there, that land now just feels very peaceful. Yet that was through a lot of work and prayer from our indigenous communities. White people, we just have a big slaughter and we walk off and we put a sign that says historical battlefield and we're done with it. You go to Gettysburg, you go to places that were borderline states during the Civil War where blood just poured into the ground. And those places are insanely haunted. And I'm not saying you might not see a ghost or two out at the Bighorn battlefield because, the Little Bighorn battlefield does have spirits that occupy it. But because of all the healing work, it's now just the ground has taken a lot of that energy back. And now it's just kind of peaceful. Like if you walk through a cemetery is what it feels like. As opposed to some of these battlefields that were just massacres and nothing has happened there in terms of balancing the land or balancing the energies or giving thanks for the lives of the people that were lost or anything. You're going to find a lot more active hauntings there. So the faked fear bullet point is that every place you encounter, every battlefield is going to be haunted. Every stitch of this earth can have a ghost on it. That is not true. Fact is, you have to have either geomagnetic, geophysical, ley line activity, or you've got to have a lot of blood in the ground that is indicative to spirit life and other beings of just traumatic things. And they come for the trauma, okay? If you want to look up Bobby Mackey's, you sure can. And you can read all about it. And it's pretty disturbing, all the weird things that have happened out there. Yet it makes sense as to why that particular location is really, really haunted. So another fake fear bullet point is that everybody can get possessed by a ghost. And this fake fear bullet point has been made very popular by a lot of paranormal TV shows. And there were a couple of individuals that were on different haunted shows back in the day. And I'm not going to name the name of the shows. However, some of these investigators were shown getting possessed by different spirits. Now, it is possible to have a spirit influence you or occupy your energy field if you are a very wide open medium person. Yet it's not a common thing. So the fake fear bullet point is that if you live in a house with ghosts, you're going to be taken over by them, because that's kind of what a lot of these shows made it look like. Well, that's not actually true. I mean, first and foremost, in order for this to happen, okay, you have to have a very powerful spirit. And powerful meaning it's fueled by the geomagnetic energy in the ground. It's fueled by ley lines. It's fueled by the Faraday cage of the house that's pulling energy up from the ground. And the ghost may actually be drawing from that energy. It might be fueled from a poorly grounded electrical system. It might be fueled from an old steel sewer pipe that's just piping through EMF. Or it's just a spirit that's been around a long time and have some maybe dark things that have been walking with it and feeding it. So it's ornery and it's got a little more, punch to it. So in order for a person to, quote, be possessed by or taken over by a spirit, that person has got to be an open channel medium. Now, a lot of people don't know they're open channel mediums. So I'm watching this particular ghost show, and there's this dude, and he's acting super weird all of a sudden. Now, I've been on ghost hunts with people who were mediums, and they could feel the spirits trying to come up on their back to kind of try your energy field on like a suit coat, or try your upper body on like a suit coat. And the creepy part about that is if you're a medium, you can feel that, you know what it is. You tell the ghost to take a hike. You protect your back energetically. You're like, ew, get out of here. You're yucky. However, if you're just a person who's investigating and you've got your K2 meter out there and the cameras are rolling and you're like, is anybody in the dark? What's your name? Come out here. Prove to me you're here. push me down, all the dumb things that get said on these shows. And I'm sorry I sound judgy, but you know what? When I'm dead, if I am somewhere as a dead person, if I'm somewhere as a ghost, and some dude wanders in with the K2 meter and is like, look, you weird butthole, come over here and prove you're here by yelling in this thing till these lights turn on. You're a loser. You're a total loser. You're not even playing with my lights. I'd be like, you know what? I'm going to let you sit in the dark and talk to yourself. That's how embarrassing you are, live human being. And I take my little ghosty self and off I'd go. Anyway, I digress. The point is that the fake fear bullet point is that every ghost is going to possess you and it's going to walk you to the edge of a cliff and make you jump off in the middle of the night. Actually, again, you got to be an open channel medium. And the other part of that is you have to have no clue that you are one. Now, most open channel mediums know that they're sensitive. They may not call themselves that, but they know that they're sensitive. Some people call themselves a hyper empath. Okay. And I watched somebody one time get fully possessed by a ghost, and it just crawled right in his flesh suit and talked to me and was crazy. And the guy whose body this ghost tried on like a suit coat for a few minutes was super drunk. He was super drunk. I may have had a martini or two, maybe, when we went to this next door house that a friend of ours owned. And a friend of ours was like, hey, you should go. This place is really haunted. You should go in there and check it out. And that's always smart, get lit up on a couple of gin martinis and go into a haunted location. That's great. Don't do that. Don't do that. That's a bad idea. That's a really bad idea. So we went in and this friend of mine had really lit one up. He was oiled up. He was trashed. And I was drunk enough at the time. I was a younger person then to not be able to say, hey, you should probably not come in here. This isn't probably safe to have, your entire auric system blown wide open like this. This is probably not a good idea. But I was, again, there may have been a cocktail involved on my end at that point as a younger person. And we were just hanging out with friends and went next door to this house. So this guy, this ghost basically puts him on like a suit coat, and the ghost is yelling at me and trying to say all these crazy, creepy things and trying to be very sexually inappropriate with me. And I laughed because the person he chose to put on like a suit coat was a screamingly gay man who would no more say the things he said to me than, please, sister, please. So, it was and I started laughing at this ghost because it was ridiculous. And I kept saying, do you have any idea who you just possessed? Do you have any idea who you're borrowing for a minute? This is hysterically funny. I wish I had something to record this with. And it just demoralized the ghost, and he kind of crawled off and left. However, later I had a conversation with my friend who, the said suit coat who was tried on. And I said, do you remember any of that? And he had no recollection of anything the ghost said. Of course, guy was kind of trashed. However, he had recollection of every single other thing that night except for that little piece where that ghost was driving the ship. Now, again, can it happen? Sure. Is it likely to happen? No, not likely. Not likely to happen. So the bullet point that's fake fear is that everywhere you go, you have to be on guard because a demon could possess you or a ghost could possess you. Actually, it's a lot harder to get possessed by demons because we are on a completely different bandwidth than they are. We have this high vibration. Demons are very slow, very dark, very thick, very dense vibration. So it takes a whole bunch of them to be able to withstand the high vibration of a human spirit and shove us out of the way. And they usually can't stay very long. It's kind of like borrowing a car and driving it around and trashing it and then leaving it in a field, So not that I'm making light of demonic possession, but it really, truly doesn't happen that often. So I just want that to be clear that even if you do have a house with a ghost in it, it is heavily unlikely that it's going to possess you. Now, an exception to that rule would be that if you are in a very haunted location day after day after day after day after day, and you are tearing apart that haunted location, that amps the energy up in that location. It agitates the spirits, it agitates the ghosts, and that can, at times, create a situation where that spirit is trying to interact with that person to change their trajectory of tearing the house apart. And I watched this happen. I had a dear friend who was renovating a house, and the house he was renovating happened to be Montgomery House. And I knew him very well because he was a musician that was signed to the record label that I was signed to. We were both musicians, and I knew him. And I'd played shows with him, and I knew his family, and I knew his personality. And as the time went by, month after month after month of him tearing apart Montgomery House and doing renovations to it, and they really put a lot of time and money into this gorgeous Victorian house. Beautiful. I mean, technically it was not a Victorian house. I think it was more of a craftsman style, but on the inside, it had that Victorian house feel. It was really beautiful. Anyway, I'm house nerding out on you. Yet I watched my friend's personality change over time because he was immersed in that house constantly. And there were a few beings in that house that really didn't want it torn down or torn apart or any of it. So, that got to be kind of a weird situation. And I remember his personality just shifting a little bit over time. And then we also see like stories like the Amityville Horror, where the main guy in the house, his personality starts changing and he gets all weird and blah, blah, which was actually a takeoff on a guy named Ronnie DeFeo, who said that a demon possessed him and he literally in real life went and shot all of his family. So, I mean, can it happen? Well, yeah, but you have to have a lot of really extreme circumstances in order to make it happen. And again, keeping in mind Montgomery House, that's why I called it Montgomery House, the perfect haunting, because Montgomery House was on this really super haunted location where hundreds, if not thousands, of Cowlitz natives from the Cowlitz tribes, they died. They got smallpox. And when Lewis and Clark came through on the Columbia River, because the Columbia is right there by Kalama, it flows right next to it, Lewis and Clark documented right in that area going through a Cowlitz village that just smelled rotten because everybody in the village had died and they were just laying there rotting. So that's where the land, again, we're talking about trauma in the land, right? That's where on this land, all of this had occurred. And in the basement of the house, there was a live spring. So we have running water, we have land trauma. The house itself was a hospital and a doctor's office. It was a bordello. There were home-style abortions performed there. And there were some bizarre piles of bones that were found underneath of the floorboards and in the basement. The basement was dirt. And so when my friends were renovating the house and pulling up an old patio or an old porch rather off the back of the house, there were literally just piles of bones. And they looked like they could have been animal bones. Yet there were also a lot of what the gal who lived there, she thought they looked like baby craniums. And it was really interesting because my friend, the same one I was talking about, who struggled with his personality shifting, and I talked to him about it later, and he didn't seem to recall his personality shifting, but boy, it would on a dime. He didn't have the same recollection that she did. She had a very different recollection than he did, and he just remembered him as cow bones. And his wife at the time, they're not married anymore, but his wife at the time started laughing and was like, I don't think that was a cow bone. So anyway, it was an interesting thing. So Montgomery House had a lot of trauma of some kind, whether it was a slaughterhouse, whether it was children that were aborted, whether it was bones of some kind of other trauma that happened there. But definitely with the Cowlitz Nation and all the death there, that certainly did wrap into the ground a lot of trauma. So that's why I filmed the documentary there. And for everybody who keeps asking, God bless you. We had it on DVD. We had Montgomery House on DVD for the longest time. And I am looking for a place where people can rent it. And I've been slow to do that because initially Montgomery House was shot for a TV network. And then at the last minute, the TV network decided they didn't want it. And the TV network had ordered this TV show in 2008. They ordered it to be shot in 4:3, which was the old TV format before the 16:9 long TVs, right? In standard definition. And that's what they ordered it in. And just a year after that, all TV went to 16:9. And of course, everything went to high def. And now it's ultra high def, right? So I've got this amazing documentary that got ordered by a network. They never did take it. And it's in standard definition at 4:3. But I guess it's better than nothing. But I got to find a place where you guys can watch it. I could put about $5,000 into it and punch it back up to 16:9 and make it HD. And they just kind of put extra pixels in there. But I don't know. I don't know that that's necessary. Maybe it is. Who knows? However, I'm working on a place you can rent it. It's an amazing documentary. So I'm working on it. I'll let you know. So anyway, I hope this clears up some fear versus fact bullet points on how hauntings happen, you know, what ghosts can do and what they can't do to you, because there's a lot of misinformation about that, and how we can go about coexisting with spirit life and not worry about it. And there's a lot of elemental life that is in our homes, in the ground, in our yards, that we don't even notice. There is a lot of spirit life in our homes that we just don't notice, okay? And just because you feel a spirit in your house, it might not even want to interact with you. It may be like, oh, you precious little pudding, I'm just passing through, and I don't even like your time frame, you know? Or a lot of times, more often than not, I hear about friendly spirits that are in people's homes. You know, spirits that will make sure that they kind of push a door closed at a weird time, so somebody has to go open it. When they do, they realize, oh, geez, I left my house key in the deadbolt outside. Or I had a situation one time when I had a spirit in a house turn on a light in a kitchen. And I was sitting watching TV, and the light in the kitchen just came on. And my wife looked at me and she says, you need to handle that. I'm not dealing with that. So I walk in to turn the light off. And the minute that I touched the light plate, I could feel the message that the spirit had put into the light plate. And it's easy to, kind of like a Post-it note, like an energy Post-it note, because the light plate has electromagnetic energy running through it, right? It has wires to it. And the message was, oh my God, you forgot all of your kids' laundry downstairs and she has to go to school. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. Thank you so much. So I went downstairs. I changed the laundry. Sure enough, all my kids' laundry. She was in, I think, junior high then. It was all in the washer, you know, or grade school or something. I put it into the dryer so she'd have some clean clothes. I forgot all about it. And so the spirit was trying to help me and say, hey, you got to get your clothes through. So more often than not, the spirits that are around us in our homes are very helpful. And if they're too intrusive, you can just say, hey, I recognize you're there. You know what? I just need a little space. I'm sure you're perfectly lovely. I'm getting a little weirded out, and I'm sure that's not your fault. Yeah, just give me a little space and we'll be fine. And 9 times out of 10, that spirit will leave you alone, you know. They just sometimes want to be acknowledged. They just want you to know they're there, or sometimes they don't. They don't want to be acknowledged. They just want to go about their thing. So I'll leave you with this too. Really quickly. One of the other fake fear bullet points is that everything on earth has a residual haunting in it. Again, kind of like every space has a ghost on it. That's not true. A residual haunting is kind of like a hologram that plays itself back over and over. Like the Princess Leia that comes out of the front of R2-D2. And then all of a sudden, you know, he's saying, okay, you know, help me, Obi-Wan, you're my only hope. That particular hologram that plays over and over in an area that could look like a see-through person, or could be, sometimes it's a battle on a battlefield and it just keeps happening over and over again. That's an energy that gets trapped and freeze-framed, and generally that's because of geomagnetic and geological attributes. So usually you've got some kind of underground water source. You've got something, maybe it's in a castle where the walls are made of limestone and granite, and those are crystalline content, really, really high electromagnetic conductive elements. And what will happen is if something was chronically done in that area, like if there was always a servant passing through, it will just catch the energy of that action and hold it in space-time and play it back like a hologram. But the hologram is not conscious. It's not a ghost. It's energy that's stored and is able to get projected back because of the elements that the energy is stored in. And no, not every place is capable of a residual haunting. Again, you have to have a pretty specific setup for that. So I could keep going on and on forever because, like I said, my background was in paranormal investigation and the paranormal community, and many of the paranormal shows that are on TV right now are fantastic. A few of them are super stinkers, and I'm guessing you probably are aware of the ones that make you go, So again, I'm not going to mention any names, yet when you're watching paranormal television, just make sure that you dial in where your truth factor is there. If your gut is telling you it's crap, it probably is. And enjoy your paranormal TV shows. Just understand not everywhere is possessed. A demon is not in your refrigerator. Well, maybe, but wow, good luck with that. It's very highly unlikely that you are going to drag a ghost home or get possessed by a ghost. And your house is probably doesn't have a hole to hell in it, unless you live in Montgomery House, in which case we did kind of seal up that hole to hell through a wonderful Cowlitz ceremony that Chief Roy Wilson performed. So there you go. Everything has an opportunity to balance it out. So I hope this has been helpful. I had a lot of fun with this podcast. And keep those questions coming about ghosts and everything else. We're going to keep the podcast at an hour. I've had a lot of really positive feedback from everybody that the podcast at an hour or thereabouts is really working for folks. So if you're somebody that needs a shorter podcast, I invite you to go ahead and pause the podcast, come back to it when you got time to listen, and pick it up again. And I'm so happy to have you all here. I will see you next podcast.